Toni
Hey,
and
Rusty.
Robin.
Kia ora, kia ora, kia ora from the South Seas. It's nice to see you, Rusty.
Hello. Good to see you. So literally two of my favorite people in the whole world. Yeah.
You are so sweet, Rusty.
And you are on the other side of the
just,
world.
It's because we're not grown up either, is it?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think so. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. So you want to just tell a little bit of who are you? And why should people be interested in this conversation with you two? And I could just say, like, I'll say they're the movers and shakers, some of the biggest movers and shakers in New Zealand, in the Southern Hemisphere, in the whole world, that inspiring early childhood education, deep thoughts, Zentangle, playscape design, play design, ukulele playing, singing, some multi-talented people here.
Kia ora, what a lovely thing to say. Basically, circus folk. Is that what you're saying?
Carney kids.
Carney kids, yeah.
We're basically we run an organization called Child Space, and Child Space we have 4 small early childhood services here in Wellington in New Zealand. You can all come over and visit one day when we open our borders to y'all. But at the moment we're all pretty protected on this little island, so we're keeping it that way for now. And we realize how fortunate we are in that regard, absolutely. And we've always realized how fortunate we are to live in New Zealand, that it really is a special place. I know, Rusty's put in for, asylum with us sometime.
Asylum.
He's certainly been to visit. Anyway, and Child Space also specializes in professional development for teachers, and Robin and his team work with the, well, I'll let you tell them.
So I've got a team of mainly experienced early childhood teachers, men who are still wanting to contribute, but perhaps don't have the degree level qualification that's becoming more and more required to be an early childhood teacher here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so we design and build quality, respectful learning spaces for young children. So sometimes it's an entire playground, sometimes it's a nappy change table or a diaper change table, as you'd say over there, Rusty. So basically everything is custom built, and we just really thrive on building weird things. And especially when it comes to playscapes, we're creating playscapes that allow children and teachers and educators to be able to create a lot of change in these spaces, so that they're flexible spaces that allow children and teachers to co-create spaces that have got the right level of physical challenge, but also speak to the whole child as far as socio-dramatic play, and allow children to have sort of fantasy games that allow them to create really strong and meaningful friendships. And basically playscapes that speak to the whole child, just like yourself, Rusty. So
and we're also married, and so we're partners in business and in life, and we have 2 children of our own. So we have Tui Lou, who's 20, and she is a stand-up comedian. So we're super proud of her. She's been a stand-up comedian since she was 16, which we think is incredibly courageous.
And what a real job. Like, that's a grown-up job, right?
That's a grown-up job, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then our son, he also has a grown-up job too. He's followed us into early childhood, and we're really proud of him. He's actually a really talented musician. He went away to music school when he finished high school, and he recorded an album, and it charted and everything. And then he came home from music school. We said, "What do you want to do now, son?" And I just thought, he's going to be a starving artist his whole life, because that's what musicians I know generally are. And he said, "Well, I'd really like to make a difference in this world, so I'm going to study early childhood." So he'll still be a starving artist.
And boy, did we brainwash him.
Good job.
Yeah.
Hey, I had just a question. What do you mean by respectful spaces? I heard you just say that. I know you've said it before.
Really good point. Basically, spaces where children are empowered. They're given a sense of agency, a sense of control and influence over not only how the environment is set up, but how it's used, and basically their place in it. I think a lot of time, if we're giving children very fixed, unmoving play equipment, especially in the outdoors, that it's as if the environment is telling the child how to play, where to play, when to play. Whereas we are turning that on its head, where we're saying, all right, we're observing our beautiful young people. We're recognizing what their urges are, what's interesting them at that very moment, and then together we're changing the environment to suit that interest, that level of physical ability, and so on. So that's basically what I mean by respectful. It's putting the child at the center of the design process.
And the physical spaces too, it's not just the physical spaces. There's an element of respect in the program that, for example, we insist on an indoor-outdoor flow so that children have free access to outdoors whenever they like. And I know that there are programs where that access is restricted for whatever reason, but often when we really search what the reasons are, that is the adult's perspective of what time is appropriate to go outside or what weather is appropriate to go outside. But you will find there is not a child in the universe who doesn't want to be outside. So we just think, that old adage, there's no such thing as bad clothing. As bad weather, only bad clothing. But we changed it as well and said there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad attitudes.
Yeah, girlfriend.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, no, it's true. And it's not just the bad clothing for kids, it's often the teachers, right? And if it's too cold or it's raining, and is it about the kids? Are you protecting the kids, or is it more like you don't want to get outside? And
well said.
We always ask this question about everything we do at Child Space. We ask this little question, 4 little words: who is it for? Who is it for? Every aspect of the program we can analyze under that lens. Who is it for? And the answer is so often the teachers and the adults. And I think that if the answer is not the child, we need to review the practice every time.
How do you do that? How would you review something?
Well, just by coming together as a team and being really honest. So you have to be quite vulnerable, have to be quite courageous to really confront this, because you say, who is it for? Okay, all the nappies need to be changed by 11, say. Who is it for? Well, it's not for the child who regularly poos at 11:30, So we have to really look at that and say, it's so that this practice has been done so that we can have our lunch breaks all on time, kind of thing. Well, is that really a good reason to have this practice in place? Because actually we asked who is it for. We've got some really amazing kayak, or as we call them in New Zealand, or teachers. And they have been really open to this suggestion and idea of examining who is it for and being really honest with each other and with themselves. And they got to the point where they'd asked who is it for, and they asked us about the clock on the wall. Who is it for? And of course, children can't tell time. So they realized that the clock was there for the benefit of the adults. And therefore, if it had no benefit to children, perhaps it could come down. So they took the clock down and found that actually everybody still got changed and everybody still had food and everybody still went to bed and everybody got their breaks and the day actually worked really well. There was nobody watching the clock and there was no have to and rosters and time frames. It was just that the rhythms of the children were really respected and really enabled, and that way and in that way the teachers were so impressed they never put the clock back up. So they have to this day a small clock next to the documentation where they might say when a child had a nappy change, for example. But other than that, they don't have a clock on the wall, and they really do go by those rhythms.
It's a much more peaceful sort of approach to that. And of course, it also allows us to get to know those young children so much better because their rhythms are changing, week by week. So that's, So
if we're not saying, well, it's 11 o'clock, so you need to go to sleep, we're actually just observing them and actually seeing their cues and gestures and really understanding.
Yeah, you're in the flow. It's like magical to think of an adult joining, the flow of childhood and how it goes. And that, we are on different time speeds, different time zones, children and adults, but how amazing it is to get on that and how, what a jump that must be at first for people, for adults to do that. But, I think about that, like being in nature and not having the clocks and things. And it's like, you can sink down, you're on earth speed.
Oh, good one.
Rhythms, right? The rhythms of the seasons, the rhythms of the day and of weather and all that. And how can you live your life according to like that earth speed? And that's the same, on kids speed. And it's a different thing. Amazing. So that was a successful experiment to get into the
Oh,
zone
yeah,
that way?
and it's ongoing.
Absolutely. It's just something that we keep asking, and that as a provider of professional development, I'm always challenging other teams to ask the same question: who is it for? Because people get very confronted by that, and they're like, well, so the whole day can work. I'm like, yes, but who is it for? Really? And it's quite confronting to realize that a lot of what we're doing is for our own convenience, and actually has nothing to do with the well-being of children at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that with risky play or messy play, or mud puddles or rainy days and all that kind of stuff. And so often it's the adults, and and of course, then as somebody on the outside, my heart goes out to people who have to deal with 12 or 14 messy kids, and what do they do have to do. But I've been talking to people about, like, oh well, you have to change into clothes or extra clothes or all that kind of stuff, and the idea that at first it feels like, oh, that's more work, but then following what you're saying, it's like, it's not more work, it's just the work. That's
Yes.
the work.
Exactly.
That's the word.
That is
right?
the experience. I would
Yeah.
thoroughly agree. Even things like having meals together. Some people think, oh, right, we've got to get everybody fed so that we can get back to the learning. But in fact, when we come together, the children are setting the tables, they're putting the candles out ready to go, they're putting out the knives and forks for their friends. I mean, that's
preparing the food, harvesting the food, growing the food.
That is the curriculum.
That's the learning. That's where we think, if we hurry to do these routine things and don't treat them as rituals, then we're really doing children such a disservice, because what the world really needs right now are more people who care about the person next to them, and living in this way where rituals are so important will actually teach those values, as opposed to, being together for a meal is just something that we need to rush and hurry and then get back to the Legos or whatever it is. That's just not the case. Being together for a meal is life.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of early childhood professionals, I bet, who feel the stress of that clock, the stress of having to get things done, the stress of what they think their director might be, the expectations, or the other teacher.
Interesting point. Yeah, and you've got family expectations in there too, where the family is coming in and saying, well, hang about, they're 3 years old and they don't know how to write their name yet. What's going on? You crazy hippies out there, and you're flipping. This is not the 1970s,
It is at our place. All our playgrounds look like the 1970s.
Yeah, maybe with a bomb gone off.
Lots of mud and children's agency, heaps of loose parts.
Yeah. But that's really interesting what you were saying before about making mention of risky play and in the outdoors, and one of the sort of one of the developmental theories that's been really informing what we've been doing especially with our loose parts play, is the emotion regulation theory of play, which basically states that one of the main reasons that play has developed in human beings and in children over time is so that children can experience emotions like fear and anger and even jealousy and resentment in a safe environment where the play is motivation enough to be able to feel those emotions, but actually learn how to regulate them and carry on playing. So in risky play, for example, where children they're about to jump off the big log or whatever it is, they're getting all those feelings of stress, of fear, so that the heartbeat is racing and they might be clammy or they're pale, shallow breathing and stuff like that. But the fun is so exciting that they're willing to overcome those feelings and act anyway. And so the idea of the emotion regulation theory of play is that play is essentially inoculating children, if you like. It's dosing them up with manageable quantities of these kind of emotions, so that when they experience those same feelings in the real world later, they've got some capacity for regulating those emotions.
Because if those emotions are so strong that they lose it, the play's over, and that is the ticket. So they know, oh well, if I can't regulate these emotions, then I don't get to play with this guy anymore. So I need to figure out how to be reasonable, which again is that really, really preparing us really well for life, because sometimes I have to regulate my emotions, otherwise I don't get to play with this guy anymore.
But emotions come and go, they rise and fall.
Yeah, he just stays here.
Yep.
But I mean, the same thing, you coming back to the emotion regulation theory of play, the same thing could be described for children who are playing in the home corner or the socio-dramatic play corner, where you might have emotions about jealousy or being excluded or, anger. This ability, this play is such a powerful driver for these children, that the sense of reward that they get from play is such that they're highly motivated to be able to regulate those emotions so that the play can continue. Yeah, fascinating stuff.
It is. It's really interesting to think about, like, children playing. The idea is like, oh, you could be playing at emotions. That's one part of it. You're trying out different things. But the idea of, like, to be a human, we're going to have the myriad of emotions, all these different experiences. And, we all want to keep kids safe, or we all want them to have positive experience, or we like the idea of happy, smiling children. But the truth is, like, we as humans have all those experiences, and so will children. And we're not really protecting them. If we don't want, ultimately we really want them sad, or we don't want them angry, or maybe we do, as you're saying, because they need to try those things out in a safe environment where there's people that love them, the people that support them. And it's really important to have the fear kinds of things, or what happens when you're on the edge, because when you're older, how do you get, if you've never experienced those things, how you're going to try it out when you're a teenager, or when you're, and so if kids haven't had those kind of things. But it's amazing to think about, like, they're going to plow through all the emotions.
And it's absolutely, correct. And one of the things that's important for parents to understand about that is that sheltering children from those emotions and trying, a good example would be failure. I have a friend, she's she's a leading neuroscientist, and she talks about, when her children went to whatever, the soccer team or something, and the thing that she wanted the most for them was to lose their game. She really wanted this because what she knows is that resilience is only formed through failure, trying again. Now, when children are overprotected by, usually parents, and I think, we call that, what do you call the helicopter parenting? That's right.
Always just hovering around, ready to jump in and save people.
And I was interested to note that in Europe they call them curling parents. So they're the ones that sweep the ice in front of the balls.
Right.
But anyway, that in itself creates a person who really lacks in the esteem and ability to regulate their emotions, to fail and try again. They're just, no good.
And of course, the most important factor in that sort of development of the resilience, of the growth mindset, is having supportive, loving adults around them. So when that moment of failure does occur, and that could be falling off the box, having an injury, something doesn't work, we're actually there to be alongside them, to help them deal with that emotionally, and then try again and try again. And there are some parents who might say, oh, you didn't do that. Oh, well, never mind. Hey, tell you what, I know you can kick the ball because I saw you doing it this morning. Let's forget about that and go and kick the ball. Now that's the opposite of a growth mindset, where we see failure as an opportunity to learn. That's a fixed mindset. And even though that might make you feel like, oh, the child's back on the successful path, you've actually told them that if they fail, just go away and try something else.
You've restricted a learning opportunity for them to really try again. And that is exactly how resilience is born. In fact, this friend of mine, she also says, when I've got a brand new baby in my arms now, what should I do? She said, well, I think you should, take that baby home and scare the shit out of it at least 100 times in its first couple of years.
And then bring it back, you see, and then you say, it's okay. And then you scare the crap out of them again.
That's probably not exactly, good advice.
Might have to bleep that one out too there, Rusty.
You might have to bleep that one. But you get it too. You get the point she's making is that the child must learn from a very early age that things will happen that don't feel okay, but it's how we deal with those things in the moment that actually create that ability to be a good human.
And look, and risky play is completely
Yeah.
intertwined with that concept just really beautifully, because the thing about risky play is it's an exciting and thrilling activity that has a risk of failure and physical injury in it. It is a thrill. It is exciting. It's a rush. Children are drawn to it. But if you're not failing now and again, you're not trying hard enough.
That's what I think about skiing.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
basically, if you're not completely wet from head to toe, you really haven't tried hard enough.
Yeah. Get off the bunny slope.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Robin's been doing lots of research lately into superhero play as well, and playful aggression.
Okay.
That would interest your audience too.
Yeah. What have you been finding?
Well, I mean, it's certainly here in Aotearoa. I mean, we're both early childhood teachers, and we started teaching in the very early 1990s, and the predominant sort of attitude towards playful aggression, or aggressive play, if you prefer, was absolutely suppress it completely. So we're talking about things like superhero play, but also gun play and weapons play and things like that. And basically the research that we've been doing is saying that this desire towards playful aggression is a common element across all children, across all cultures to some degree. And so I guess that the thing is that because it's such a natural outpouring, and because children are sort of drawn to be wanting to test themselves physically against other people, but also they're living in a world that sort of celebrates the armed forces. Even sports teams have quite aggressive warrior figures or weapons, even in their logos and things like that. So it makes sense that they're using their play to as a method of making sense of how society sees violence. So I guess it is something that children are drawn to, and it may well be partly because we have such a traditionally feminized teaching workforce in the profession, that when we're completely suppressing that kind of play to the point where children are, that play's being driven underground, those natural desires are still there, but often they're becoming manifested in different ways. So one of the things we're doing at Child Space, for example, is we're making a huge distinction between replica weapons, plastic guns and plastic swords and stuff like that. We don't have any of those. But if a child does pick up a stick and wants to pretend to shoot ducks or something like that, we're just making sure that we're there as responsive, loving adults alongside them to make sure that they understand the context of the play and that it's done in a respectful way. Basically, you don't shoot anybody who doesn't want to be shot, things like this.
Or piaud. They call it piaud.
Yeah,
so if you don't want to be piaud, you shouldn't play the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the other, because one of the elements of risky play, of course, is this idea of rough and tumble play, of children
testing physical limits. Yeah, and strength.
So I mean, some of the things that we're doing to sort of give an outlet for these urges in children in a sort of lawful and respectful climate is, before any of this play kicks off, we're making sure that together, the children, we sit around and we're actually setting a whole bunch of ground rules about if this play is going to happen, this is what's going to happen. We're creating safe zones. So you might say, look, if you want to go and pretend to be the Marines or whatever you want to do, we only do that down on that part of the playground. This is a safe part. None of that play goes on here. We're also doing things like having sock wrestling. I don't know if you've ever tried sock wrestling.
No.
Rusty?
What is sock wrestling?
Well, it's a really good drinking game too, Rusty.
Oh yeah, all right.
Basically, the idea of sock wrestling is simply that each child or big child has one sock on their foot. So a sock or two socks on their feet. All we need to do is retrieve a sock from the other person.
Oh.
So what we've got is a crash mat or a big mattress or something in the center that acts as an arena. And this is the thing: if you want to wrestle, that's cool, but you only wrestle when you're on the mat. It's always a consensual activity.
Yeah.
And so basically, beforehand, we've also sat around and we've developed the rules together. So we'll say no biting, no punching in the testicles. I mean, whatever. Yeah. No poking in the eyes.
Yeah.
We've got some good fair rules. So the children
and
are really
we shake hands. We shake hands, and away you go. And coming back to what you were saying before about losing, Tony, because it's a wrestling thing. There's no hitting or anything like that. All you have to do is get one sock off the other person. The times that we're getting tears, Rusty, is when somebody gets their sock pulled off and they've lost. and everybody's going, yeah, well done. But that's the first time they've ever lost anything in their life. That's what's upsetting.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. And yet they're building resiliency when they get their sock
absolutely.
pulled off, even though it hurts a little bit.
I'll give you a game next time we meet, Rusty.
Oh yeah.
There'll be tiny little shot glasses of
Oh
beer.
yeah. Come on. Your
Oh,
sock's
you are
going
so-
down.
You're such a
I believe it.
playful human being.
Yeah, and
Rusty.
you're so flexible too. So I'm actually.
Yeah, I
she
think you're
should
going to
take
waste
Toni
it.
on.
I think you're going to waste it.
Yeah, well, because I'm still wrestling around with my 9-year-old and 5-year-old, so I get day. Well, I mean, you all get daily practice too, but oh no, I'm right in, and I'm in there. But we're gonna do it. I'm gonna do some sock
Wait
wrestling.
until they're 20 and they beat you.
Yeah, I know. They're kicking my butt. I know.
It's an interesting time of life when they overtake you in strength and power and speed.
Can we change the subject? What else is on your mind, Rusty?
It's building resilience it's good resiliency for Robin, right?
Chelsea.
Sometimes, yep.
Yeah.
You can regulate your
Oh,
emotions.
look, being married to me for 25 years is good resiliency for
Yeah,
Robin.
he's definitely a resilient guy. Huh. Let's see. Where do we go? Where do we go from here?
Politics, Rusty.
Oh no.
Oh dear. Oh well. Here's
Look,
an
that's
interesting.
probably enough for your poor listeners. They're probably, that's probably
Yeah,
had
no.
enough
This
by
is
now.
this is our vacation from that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay,
hey,
fair
here's
enough.
something with the guns I found interesting. In the States, there's a lot of shootings,
Yes.
and guns in general. Especially I'd say with the early childhood world, those are people that are probably not doing shooting and probably not necessarily pro-gun,
Mm.
except in different parts of the country or different parts of North America. I found, and this is really interesting, that it's definitely a hot button topic that people think, oh, if kids are doing gunplay or war play, it's going to make them violent when they get older. It's going to make them want to shoot people or that kind of thing. What you're saying, it is a natural thing that is cross-cultural, cross-generational, hundreds
Absolutely.
and kind of forever. There's been that kind of play. But when I've worked with groups that are big hunters, where the families are big hunters, like going up to like different parts in Canada where they're like hunting, the parents go hunting moose and all this stuff. So like guns are just thought of as a different thing. So they're like,
safety is an important part of it as well.
Yeah, and so like we're fine with kids playing guns, having gunplay.
Really interesting what you were saying about the perceived connection between a playful aggression or aggressive play in children and aggression in adults. So there's absolutely no research that makes any correlation between those two things. Essentially, the children and adults, if they're good sensitive adults, can instinctively tell the difference between real aggression and playful aggression. And the difference is intent. The intent to actually harm somebody else, the intent to actually, make people,
I've heard that the point of rough and tumble play or play fighting is to keep the play going. Whereas if you're in a real fight, the goal is to probably end the fight. Like
really good call.
Somebody and end
great
it.
analogy.
Yeah.
So essentially, all children's attitudes towards aggression are directly related to their family home environment's attitude to aggression. So aggressive adults
come from aggressive adults.
Come from aggressive, basically home environments. What we're doing in our early childhood services, what we're seeing there is basically a manifestation of what's going on at home. So again, there is no research anywhere that directly links playful aggression or aggressive play with true aggression in adults. That's all coming from what's going on at home.
Yeah, and it's all a perception as well. That's it's easy to perceive that because it makes some kind of logical sense, but in fact, that intent thing is so important. Is that this is a natural urge to play out my strength and my power. And when I can do that in a safe way with responsible adults and
with mates,
friends around me, then I get to experience all of that. And that has no bearing then later on for becoming really aggressive, I've played that aggression, and that's kind of, I guess, filled that bucket for me. Where there was an interesting case here, actually, Rusty, in New Zealand. We had an early childhood service that we worked with, and that because here we have there's a lot of rural centers. We live in a city, in the capital city in Wellington, but there is, much of our land in New Zealand is farmed, and so in our farming communities, in our rural communities, there are plenty of children who are exposed to guns because of the need
like your Canadian mates.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So hunting and so forth. And so these children would be, because that's part of what they're playing out from home, they would be, maybe finding a stick and pretending it's a weapon or whatever. And there was such a big group of these children who were all wanting to have this kind of gunplay that the teachers came up with an ingenious thing, which was actually to license the children with guns. And they created these little gun licenses that they hung around their necks, and you could have your gun license revoked if you, for example, peeled at someone instead of at animals, or if you peeled at someone who didn't want to be peeled. So this gun license came with real responsibility of knowing exactly how to keep a gun.
So there's a gun safe there. So legally, as a firearms license holder, you must have a lockable gun safe in your house where you store the guns. And so they had one of these at the preschool.
So it's an exact microcosm, because to have a gun in New Zealand, you have to have a license, and it has to be, you have to, basically the police actually have to interview your partner to make sure that you're, suitable, and
you have to
ask
get a
you
referee
what you're going to be using your gun for, and all of that kind of thing. And then it needs to remain in a lockable safe. So they basically made this replica of that whole process for these young children to understand the real seriousness of actual guns.
Yeah, and their licenses say, this is a license. They draw a picture of themselves, they hang it around their neck, and it says you can shoot ducks, which is big in New Zealand, bears, which we don't have, and monsters. So basically, as long as you're going for one of those three things, you're okay. Yeah, but yes, they get very upset when they have their gun licenses revoked for the day. So their gun gets put back in the safe, their license gets put back in there too. Yeah.
I just thought it was a really innovative way to deal with something that otherwise might have put people off. But again, coming back to who is it for, and that intentional teaching kind of thing, is I think that playful aggression, superhero play, all of those big rough and tumble play and things, like Robin said, we've had a fairly feminized workforce. And I actually think that most of it was driven underground simply because it's a hassle to have children shouting and running around in the environment and, pow, 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 and smashing things up and that kind of thing. It's hard work, as
opposed to a nice little home corner,
as opposed to a nice little sort of feminized sort of situation. But the bottom line is that we want to be able to explore all of our human traits, our masculine and our feminine sides, and we want to be able to do. We want children to be exposed to as much as they possibly can in a safe realm.
Yeah, and many of our teachers, of course, will have experienced it to some level, aggression from males. Some maybe experienced gun violence, so you can see why they'd be a little shy of that sort of play. Yeah. But I think as intentional teachers, we've got to recognise that and
the value
and
of
actually,
it.
Move past it. Because the other thing about a lot of this playful aggression is it's based on social interactions. It's very much fantasy play where it's friendship building. And we're working through these things together. That's an incredibly important part. I mean, part of the research that I was looking at was saying that in one study, this is from the UK, that young boys in particular, because they were getting this kind of play, always no, 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 we're starting to feel like they didn't belong at preschool because all the kinds of play that they were into were being suppressed. And it was actually leading to a negative gender identity, to this idea that boys aren't as good as girls because boys are always getting told off. Now that's a pretty heavy concept to lay on you at this time of the morning, Rusty. Forgive me, but really fascinating stuff that we're just going to take our time and think really carefully through these issues, I reckon.
Yeah. And kind of the next level of that is a lot of stuff that we're kind of looking at hard here in the States, like the anti-bias then version of that kind of stuff, because so over here it's like could be boys who are like got a little bit more ants in their pants, but then here, and even in Ithaca, the schools I work with here, elementary schools, the black boys, the boys of color, are they're biased, that they're going to be causing more problems, and that they're the ants in their pants. The teachers are quicker to see what they're up to and to dampen them down. So it's like they got the boy, and then you have your bias, and then so that just adds doubly, triply, quadruply into, the feelings of like,
We've got to be
what can I
really
do?
conscious.
Yeah, everything's underground. Yeah, so there's so many things to think about that.
That is, again, a really intentional thing, and we have to address it because we all suffer from determinism to some level. So this idea of deterministic thinking is where we judge somebody because of their parents' intelligence.
Right.
We might just assume someone's going to be sporty because their older sibling was, and that kind of thing. And that's really deterministic thinking. We have to challenge it at every corner, because what it does is it limits every child's potential in our mind. So we might say, oh, well, this child, obviously, they had a hard start in life, so that's going to determine their potential.
And we have less expectations of what they're capable of.
And so we set our expectations differently, we treat them differently, we completely, and so much of this is completely subconscious. So, we would all like to think that we are non-judgmental, and we would all like to believe that we treat every child the same, but the fact of the matter is we don't. And all of us, to some extent, have this subconscious level of bias or determinism, which we really have to keep checking. We have to, really check on, why do I think that? Why do I believe that? And really check ourselves. But again, it's confronting, because when you realize that you are kind of looking at someone as having fixed potential or limited potential, it's really confronting to realize that you're that human being. You don't want to be that human being. And so, but to be a good teacher, we must consistently confront our deterministic bias.
I'm always so inspired by how much you are always pushing, how much you are confronting. You really get into like the heart and soul of teaching and, being an adult around children, or adults working together, and all that kind of stuff. You're
I just think it's such an important thing, Rusty. This is, this is evolution,
Thank you. Yeah.
I got to look back at some of the things that I learned from my childhood. And living in New Zealand, we're super proud of our feminist history, looking at things like, we were the first country in the world to give women the vote, which is probably my most proud New Zealand thing. But right now we also have an extraordinary female prime minister in charge of our country, who has led us through, so many things just with absolute grace, and she's a fantastic role model. But I feel like I always think about, back to my childhood, and I say to my daughter, who is this very staunch feminist stand-up comedian, we're just standing on the shoulders of giants who came before us. This is evolution. We were always meant to take our rightful place as equals. It's just that it's always taking time. It's always taking groundbreakers, and it's always taking people who are willing to confront the awkward stuff.
Yeah, I feel, when I work with groups, it feels like, they are basing their lives on the rules that came before, or the way things are, or even the perception of like, well, we can't. And
that won't work here,
or
we can't do that,
or the regulations won't allow it. But they've never actually read the regulations. It's all been passed down, like you're saying, from people who might just can't be bothered. So let's just say that the regulations won't allow it.
That's it.
Interrupted your mid-sentence there, Rusty.
Yeah, well, there's so much. Okay, so this is a huge topic. I've been fascinated by rules, I think, in the last couple of years, and when you work all over, like you work all over, the world and in the country, and for me too, like North America, and I just hear all these different rules. One group lets their kids do this, the other group, they don't let their kids do the same thing. The other group, sand, you have to cover your sand. The other people, no, we just check our sand, go up a slide, don't go up a slide, whatever, barefoot, not barefoot. And so often, it is the rules. Where do the rules come from? Did it come from anybody who still works there? Was it past? Did the people that invented the rules for your center or your region, are they even alive? Do they have the same values that you as a people have now? you know, and I
Yeah.
think about like the coronavirus just threw everything, you know, upside down, topsy-turvy, of course, is a great time. Everybody's rethinking everything. So it's like,
Cool.
all right, let's use this time. Let's rethink our rules. Let's rethink everything. Like, and you know, it's funny because I find people, especially with the playground design and stuff like that, like they look at the regulators, or they have the fear of regulators. And of course, you show something, they say, oh, the regulators wouldn't let us do that. The licensors, they'll say no. What are they going to say? What are they going to say? So I used to think that, okay, the big thing was that it's not necessarily even what the regulators say, it's the fear of the regulators,
Yes.
the fear of the licensors, you know, our minds, our big brains, we can imagine the stuff. It was interesting. For my book, I interviewed a bunch of licensors. You know, that's such a big topic when we talk about risky play
Right.
and having rocks and boulders and, you know, crazy stuff in your yard. The licensor, I'd never heard this. They said, kind of, you alluded to it, was that the idea, like the licensors are often scapegoats for the
Yeah.
people that
Ah,
don't want to
yes.
change. They don't want to try risky things. They don't want to get messy. And they say, oh, the licensors wouldn't let us.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
licensors.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
And
I
I
think,
found,
yeah.
I'll
So
just end this, just send, when I talk to the licensors at like the state level and the national level, they are all for risky play. They
Yeah.
have the belief that children need this. They talk about the need for building resiliency, for all the great things that we know, the importance of risky play. They say it's important. It's just like how you do it, how you supervise, how you manage it, how you communicate it then to your licensor.
Yeah.
But they could.
We've had
Wow.
to be really conscious, and we've had to be really conscious in our organization that we are not stopping play because we feel unsafe, and that we really have to look again and again and say, well, if the child doesn't feel unsafe, we need to sit on our
Mhm.
more.
Mm.
And there's some research to suggest that the older you are and the more female you are, the more likely you are to step into to risky situations. So, you know, it's a more masculine trait to say they'll be all right. You know, we had someone in our playground recently, and they were from another country, and it was our son who was teaching at the time, and this person said, "Is he all right?" You know, and pointing behind Max to show this child who was kind of toddling across this quite high beam kind of thing, and Max just turned around, had a look at him, turned back, and said, "Yeah, he feels safe." You know,
Yeah,
just
I like that. He feels
safe.
safe. He
Yeah.
feels safe.
Yeah.
And
And that's such a
just
difference than how are you feeling safe for them? Are you
Exactly.
nervous for
You're
them?
feeling unsafe.
Yeah. And there it is. Is it for the kids? Who's it for? Are you
Yeah.
saying don't climb that because you don't think they're safe, or is it because it makes you nervous? And I
Yeah.
understand, like people don't like to be nervous. They don't want
No.
bad things happening.
Yeah.
Mm. And absolutely. And just coming back to what you were saying about the regulations and the regulators, if you've got, you know, if you're a teacher, you're in a situation and you really believe in something, and somebody saying, oh no, the regulations won't allow it, say, right, first of all, this is why I'm suggesting we do it. This is intentional teaching. This is the benefit for the child. This is not just because I saw it on Instagram and I thought it looked cute. So that's the first thing. This is why we're doing it. Secondly, can you show me right now, please, in the regulations in black and white where it says I can't do this?
Yeah.
Because often, like you were saying before, the people who are saying no often don't have that information. They're just working off instinct. And it's a great opportunity for them to go off and actually re-look at the regulations, read them all from top to bottom, and just work out what we can do. So as you would say, Rusty, how do you get to your yes?
Yeah.
By the way, that beautiful book about risky play, just I recommend everybody in the entire world goes out and buys it today.
All right. All right.
Sometimes
Yeah,
I say
me
to, you know, I do a lot of teaching in other countries and things, and sometimes I say to people, because I'll be talking about infants and toddlers specifically around respect, because I think that our babies get the hardest time in early childhood services sometimes, and they sometimes get a sort of a watered down preschool education, which is really totally inappropriate for their neurological basically their development in any way. And so when people say to me, oh, we wouldn't be able to do that here, and I'm just talking about something that is just so simple, like slowing down, you know, reaching the child where they're at, things like having primary caregiving, so that we are making sure that children can form a stable, solid relationship with just one person at a time, that kind of thing. People say, oh, we couldn't do that here. And I say, oh, really? Are you not allowed to respect children in your country? Because it is an interesting thing, though, because that is what we know to be the right thing to do. And so I always come from this place of, If we know that this is right, then it is not for us to say, oh, we can't do it. It is for us to say, how are we going to, you know? It's not for us to say the regulations won't allow us. It's for us to say, how will we get around that regulation, or how can we move these regulators forward? Because that's the other thing, is that sometimes regulations are made to keep things happening. Some regulations are changed because they have to, in order to keep up with research, with science, with practice. And it's up to us to be really forthright and really advocates for what is for childhood. Yeah,
you're talking about children's rights.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Absolutely. And that, in my mind, that's our whole crusade. I'm on a mission. I think children should have equal rights, and I'm obviously never going to retire because I don't want to stop until they do.
The rights of the child.
Yeah.
Are you involved at all in the IPA, New Zealand International Play Association?
Yes, we started a chapter of it in Auckland about 5 or 6 years ago, but it didn't quite have enough oomph. So we're under the auspices of the Australian IPA.
Okay.
So that Playwrights magazine, I'm assuming as well. Yeah, that's a great resource and a really wonderful way to open your mind up to the universality of play, and how I find it really humbling to see children in Uganda playing in mock UN ambulances and playgrounds and things like that. And that's just children's play is a conduit into their world, and really amazing. What about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm part of the USA chapter here, and it's based on like the UN articles of the human rights of the child that was in 1959, a while back, that were created and ratified and signed by all countries except for the US. So now we are on this push to try to get the idea of the US signing this and backing it up and then putting things into action. But it's a real political mess. But I'm fascinated by countries like Wales. You see, like the European countries that are really like believe in children's rights, and then at governmental levels, the highest level, like have children's advocacy right in. So they sit at the table with city planners or doing laws or regional laws and everything, and the rights of children are taken into account. And then you see it in terms of like adventure playgrounds or play provision and stuff like that. So I just was wondering, like, if New Zealand has anything like that, or children's rights or play kinds of that kind of stuff, and governmental levels and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So we have a children's commissioner who basically is a government, is the top civil servant within the government, whose remit is the entire rest of the government, basically, who's always advocating for children's rights. Just as an aside, that in South Wales, there's an adventure playground called The Land, and there's a fantastic online documentary about it. Children are setting stuff on fire, and they're breaking stuff up, and they're tying ropes. And you know what? It's the play workers, adult play workers that are there, that are facilitating that play, that are supporting it. What a job! When I grow up, Rusty, that's what I want to do.
Got to be play workers.
Yeah.
Get a qualification, hook into it.
That's it. Well, so much we're talking about like the adults, and the adult mindset, and is it for the kids or for the adults? And so when I think about play workers, so there's a profession where it's like they know. I mean, they have the play work principles that are basically spelling it out. This is about the kids. This is about the play, and the intervention that I do is to support the play or extend the play, and they're always keeping themselves in check, trying not to adulterate the play.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting because it's like, we don't need the three of us now and the people watching, like, we're not really even talking about children and playing, because children, they got it down. They know what they want to do. They're playing, they're pushing the limits. They're doing things, right?
There are so many things that we can learn from children and that we have unlearned as adults. And One of them is that beautiful play. I mean, I hope that we're still really playful people, and I think we are. But I think there are some other things that we've unlearned, and one of them is mindfulness. Children are fully present in every moment, and we have unlearned that as adults. And the other thing is prejudice. Children are completely without prejudice, and as we grow and develop, and as we're influenced by others, we develop these prejudices, be they as subconscious or overt. That is something that develops, that we basically we unlearn this beautiful ability to be completely without that judgment. So yes, children are our best teachers, and we do well to be a lot more like them in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they come in pure. There's a pure spirit in there, and they join this world that we're in, and then what happens to that spirit, and hopefully that spirit continues to shine brightly. And so when I see you two, there's the spirit shining brightly that I love, and
You
it's
too,
so
Rusty.
inspiring. Yeah. There's so much more we could talk about, but this has been a great, we're scratching the surface here. We got into some good stuff, but there's so much. So I always love talking. We can wrap it up now and think till next time.
Yeah, till next time. Come and visit. Come to
We're looking forward to having some open borders and having you back to visit. And we might come to the United States, but we're probably going to wait until there's a female in charge.
Next time. You're beautiful.
I love you. You're playful soul.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.